I am 82 years old, and my hands are still as steady as a mountain. To anyone else, that would be a blessing, but for me, it is a haunting curse. I have performed exactly 5,100 two-heart surgeries in my career. I know the texture of a human aorta better than the texture of my own daughter's hair. I spent 40 long, sterile years at the Charité Hospital in Berlin, a place where life and death are separated by a 3mm stainless steel blade. Tonight, I am sitting in my apartment in Prenzlauer Berg, watching the rain wash over a city that has reinvented itself a dozen times, yet I feel like a static relic of a forgotten era. I saved 5,000 lives, but tonight, at 3 a.m., my own heart feels like an empty, echoing cathedral. I realize that while I was meticulously fixing the valves and arteries of complete strangers, my own home was slowly, silently bleeding out. I am a world-renowned master of the human heart, yet I am a complete amateur at mending the devastating silence that fills this room. Let's go back to November 9th, 1989. The wall was coming down. A nation was screaming for freedom, and the streets were filled with the smell of cheap tobacco and the exhaust of thousands of Trabants. While history was being written in the streets, I was in operating room 4, hunched over a patient. I was performing a complex mitral valve repair on a 70-year-old man from East Berlin. I remember the muffled sound of the celebrations outside, thousands of voices chanting for a new world. My wife Elena called the hospital 3 times that night. It was our daughter Clara's 10th birthday. She had a cake with 10 flickering candles, waiting for a father who never came. I chose the hospital. I chose the miracle. I told myself I was a hero for the masses, so it didn't matter if I was a ghost at my own dinner table. I stayed in that sterile building for 72 consecutive hours. When I finally walked through my front door, the cake was gone, the candles were cold stubs, and my daughter wouldn't even look me in the eye. I was a savior to the city of Berlin, but I was a total stranger in my own hallway. Surgery is a dangerous addiction. It provides the ultimate power, the intoxicating ability to stop a human heart and force it to beat again. By 1994, I was the chief of cardiac surgery. I realized I had begun to love the sharp, clean smell of antiseptic more than the subtle scent of Elena's perfume. I craved the absolute silence of the operating room more than the noisy, joyful chatter of a family dinner. At 8 a.m., holding a scalpel, I felt like a god. At 8 p.m., holding a TV remote, I felt like a failure. I would stare at the x-rays of my patients and see a beautiful logical puzzle to solve. But when I looked at my wife across the breakfast table, I saw a person I no longer knew how to speak to. I was terrified of emotions because they couldn't be quantified. They couldn't be cut with a blade. I could fix a literal hole in a heart with surgical precision, but I was paralyzed by the widening hole in my own marriage. So I stayed at the hospital. I operated on 5 people a day, effectively hiding from the one person I was supposed to protect. I returned to my apartment in the spring of 1998. The sun was just beginning to rise over the Spree River. It was 4:30 a.m. I had just spent 12 hours saving a 12-year-old girl from a complex congenital defect. I was flying high on adrenaline and professional pride. I walked into our master bedroom expecting to find Elena asleep, her breath rhythmic and soft, but the bed was empty. It was perfectly made, cold to the touch. There was a single, plain white envelope resting on her pillow. No long, tearful explanation. No screaming matches. Just one sentence written in her elegant hand. "Hans, I am tired of being the widow of a living man." She didn't want the prestige of my title, the luxury cars, or the villa we owned in Zellendorf. She simply wanted a husband who was present for more than a few hours of exhausted sleep. I sat on the edge of that cold bed and realized that I had saved 5,000 hearts in my lifetime, but I had let the most important one break right in front of me. I was so attuned to the rhythm of the heart monitor that I had become deaf to the rhythm of my own family. My daughter Clara graduated from medical school in 2005. It should have been the proudest day of my life. I stood in the audience looking at her in her gown, and I thought, finally, she will understand. She will see why I had to work those 100-hour weeks. But halfway through the ceremony, my pager buzzed. An emergency bypass. A life was on the line, and I was the only one who could do it. I slipped out of the hall before she could even find me in the crowd to take a single photograph. I sent her a solid gold Patek Philippe watch the next day with a note that said, "So proud of my fellow doctor." She sent it back within hours. The note she attached simply said, "I don't need to know what time it is, Dad. I needed to know who you were." I realized then that I was a legendary name in the medical journals, but I was nothing more than a ghost in the story of her life. I had taught her how to save others, but I had shown her that a life saved at the expense of love is a hollow, bitter victory. In 2010, the hospital administration threw a massive gala to celebrate my 5,000th surgery. It was a night of tuxedos, expensive champagne, and endless flashing lights. I stood on that stage, holding a glass trophy that felt heavier than a human heart. As the audience stood up to give me a 5-minute standing ovation, I scanned the crowd. I saw the faces of the people I had saved, men and women who were back with their families because of me. I saw a grandfather hugging his grandson, crying with joy. I realized I had given that man exactly what I had denied myself: time. I had spent 40 years building a bridge for thousands of strangers to cross back to their loved ones, while I had burned my own bridge behind me. I went to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and saw a man who was a savior to the world, but a complete bankrupt in his own soul. I resigned the very next morning. I realized that all the applause in the world cannot drown out the sound of a silent house. Retirement is a lethal weapon for a man whose only identity was a title. When you stop being the great Dr. Weber, you wake up as just an old man with slightly shaky hands and a phone that no longer rings at 3 a.m. I spent the first 2 years of my retirement sitting in this library, waiting for an emergency that would never come. I craved the blood, the adrenaline, the life-or-death decisions. I realized I didn't know how to boil an egg properly. I didn't know the names of the neighbors I had lived next to for 20 years. I had focused so much on the human heart as a biological pump that I had forgotten it as a vessel for love. I was a king without a kingdom, surrounded by leather-bound textbooks that couldn't tell me how to spend a Tuesday afternoon without feeling like I was disappearing. I saved the city, but I forgot how to save myself from the silence. 2 years ago, on a Tuesday just like any other, I felt it. The familiar crushing weight on my chest, the elephant sitting on the ribs. Ironic, isn't it? The man who fixed 5,000 hearts was finally failing his own. I lay on the floor of this kitchen, and as the darkness began to close in, I didn't think about my awards or the 5,102 patients I documented. I didn't think about my salary or the corner office at Charité. I thought about the way Elena's hair smelled in the summer of '74 and the way Clara used to grip my thumb when she was a toddler. I realized that at the threshold of death, your resume is just a piece of paper, and your title is just a sound. I survived because of a young surgeon who was likely as busy as I used to be. When I woke up in the recovery room, there were no flowers, no family, just the rhythmic beeping of the monitor, the soundtrack of my life, now a haunting reminder of everything I had traded for it. I tried to call Clara last month. I practiced for 3 days. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I'm sorry I chose 5,000 strangers over you. I wanted to beg her to let me see my grandchildren. But when she picked up, I heard the clinical coldness in her voice, the same coldness I had taught her by my example. I froze. I didn't know how to be a father. I only knew how to be a professional. I asked her about her residency. I asked her about her surgical rotation. She replied with clipped, efficient sentences. She said, "I'm doing fine, Dr. Weber. I have a surgery starting in 10 minutes. Goodbye." She called me Dr. Weber, not Papa, not even Hans, just the title. I hung up and realized that you cannot buy back 30 years of absence with a 10-minute phone call. I am a man who can repair a mitral valve with my eyes closed, but I am utterly helpless against the wall of silence I built with my own hands. I am a billionaire in medical knowledge, but I am spiritually bankrupt. My final advice to you, from a man who has held the beating life of 5,102 people in his steady palms: do not save the world at the total expense of your own home. The hospital will replace your skill in 48 hours. Your company will delete your email address in a week. But to the people who love you, you are a singular, irreplaceable light. Do not wait until your hands are too shaky to hold a pen to finally write the words, "I am sorry," or "I love you." The invisible debt is the life you skip while you are busy being important. Go home tonight, turn off your phone, look at the people in front of you. Because in the very end, you won't remember the lives you saved or the awards you won. You will only remember the love you failed to protect. Subscribe to Last Perspective, and please, for the love of God, do not let your own heart be empty.